It's not even summer yet, and I'm already dying. So not too long ago, I shot a super low budget music video. Now, when I say super low budget, I mean super low budget. This project came to me the way most of my projects do, via email. Julia, the producer director, got in touch, and I definitely wanted to be on board for this. You see, these sort of jobs don't come along very often for me. Well, creative jobs do, but this style of work never comes along often for me. So I don't really get to do the fashion-y style music videos. And that's something I want to do. You want to show how broad your skill set is, and you want to show people that you're adaptable to all situations. So it is something that I want to put on my reel, which is why I did not want to pass up the opportunity to do so. Pre-production on this one was kind of short. We really only had 2 meetings before the shoot day, which isn't ideal, but it's pretty much all we could do, and we tried our best with what we had because we both had very full schedules at that time, but that was the timeline for the artist, so we just had to make it work. In our meetings, we discussed crew, logistics, costs, lots of different things. We didn't go too in depth with everything. A lot of it was done via email, which was a little bit different for me because I do like to do things in person, preferably, but that's just the nature of this one. Now, I will admit, initially I was under the impression that we did have a lot more budget than was actually there. I don't know, I miscalculated somehow, and I had in my head all of these ideas about what we could use and how we could make it look. I had the idea that maybe we might hire some nice vintage lenses to get the vintage look that you can see in the music video, and maybe potentially I could call in a favor and get an Alexa SXT on board as well, so that would be really cool to just amp up the production values of the shoot. But in the end, we definitely did not have the budget to do that. And that's okay, that's totally fine, but I do think that's a lesson learned, and the lesson is to always clarify the scope of the budget. If you are given a figure, make sure that that figure is specifically for camera, not overall or anything like that. Just make sure you know exactly how much money you've got in your pocket or in your department before you start deciding on ideas or putting ideas out there, because if you start to put ideas out there, you may get the hopes up of whoever you're talking to, the director, the producer, the artist, the client. But this is all good because filmmaking is about creative problem solving. So I just kind of worked out what budget we had and what was feasible for that money to get as close as I could to the style that we were going for. We were going very Virgin Suicide sort of style, very high fashion, film look, low contrast, warm tones, lots of pastels. So looking into all of our options, I knew that camera would be kind of semi-decided for us because we didn't have the budget for any higher end cameras. We settled on the Blackmagic Pocket 4K. This was actually a good thing because you can adapt lenses to those cameras quite easily, and there's a lot of adapters out there you can use. We ended up actually using an FD mount adapter, and we used FD vintage glass because lenses are where your style is going to come from in these sort of cases where you can't decide on your camera. Lens is going to be really the only factor involved in bringing in a style or a look to what you're doing. So using the Blackmagic Pocket camera plus the vintage glass will give us that nice soft look even though it is a digital image. And with the Blackmagic's dynamic range and color science, we should get a really pleasing result. So that was how we decided on the camera package, but now let's talk about the actual shoot. Along with the challenge of this shoot being a micro budget shoot, we also were faced with other challenges on the day as well. We didn't get to do a recce beforehand, so I was walking into this blind. Julia had seen the location before, she had scoped it a little bit and sent me photos, which is cool and that's something at least, but because I hadn't done a full recce, it was very hard to explain to my gaffer, Hannah, what I wanted. So that took a little bit of time to work out. We were lucky in the way that this house was actually on sale recently and it had just sold, so there were a lot of recent images of the house online, as well as a layout of the house too, which gave us measurements of the rooms. So that was one issue, but we also had an issue because we had minimal crew. In total, I think I've written here, there were about 16 cast and crew members, but half of those were cast. So we were left with a very skeletal crew. So pretty much in my direct crew, talking about camera and lighting, we had a gaffer, so we had Hannah the gaffer, and then we also had her best girl, Beth, and then I also had an assistant as well, Louie. So we were pretty much that core team working around camera and lighting, and that was all the assistants we had. So it was a lot of everybody doing a bit of everything. Now, it is really nice to have a small crew sometimes, and I personally do like jobs where there is a small crew, but one thing I think that really held us back was the fact that we didn't have a first AD. Having a first AD on set is really, really helpful, and not having one there just kept us behind the ball pretty much all day. The first scenes we shot were inside the bedroom, and they were fairly complicated, but not as complicated as the last scene, which I'll talk about later. But this first scene, we ended up spending so much time in the bedroom sorting out all of those shots that we kind of lost track of time and we fell behind very, very quickly. This sort of thing happens on shoots a lot. You end up falling behind a little bit, but if you've got a good first AD, you can make up that time later and you can pretty much not compromise anything in the shoot. But because we didn't have a first AD to do that, we ended up having to compromise and cut so much that the middle of the shoot and all of the stuff that we shot in the kitchen or down the hallway, all of that stuff was a little bit rushed. And we only cut and compromised that middle of the shoot because we definitely knew that we needed more time at the end to complete the final sequence. So compromising that middle section was inevitable. It had to happen because we had no other way about it, and we had no first AD to push us along from the start. So it's just the way it panned out. But this is by far my least favorite part of the music video. This whole middle section, everything's a little bit sloppy, a little bit just pushed and shoved together, and just, we could have finessed it so much if we had a lot more time. That's a lesson learnt though. Still had fun, don't get me wrong, but that's a lesson learnt. So yeah, this last part was really complicated. It was very complicated to set up. It was very complicated to shoot. So I knew how I wanted it to look, and I definitely wanted a large soft source light over our main actress, our main band member, and then I wanted some soft lighting from the sides for the band members at the back, just to give it a little bit of separation. But the first problem is the room we had access to was very, very small. Now, to get the light that high and that close to Elizabeth, the main band member, we would have had to use a lighting boom, and we did end up using a lighting boom. That worked out really well because Hannah already had one. That was easy. But I wanted a large round soft light, so we needed to have some sort of modifier that we could attach to a light on the end of that boom. You see, I wanted to get those really nice large catches in Elizabeth's eyes, but also focus it directly on her. So I wanted to have a grid on it, or an egg crate on it, to make sure that that was focused in on her and not on the rest of the band members, or at least feathered off on the rest of the band members. And then I also wanted that going through muslin as a diffusion instead of just a regular diffusion sheet, because muslin looks nicer on skin tones, in my opinion. So a couple of layers of muslin and a grid to focus that. But every single thing I just said, minus the boom, didn't happen. Prior to shoot day, Hannah and I tried to come up with different solutions to this problem. We thought about everything. We looked at all of the lights and the rigging equipment that she had to try and come up with a solution without seeing the location, which was very, very difficult. We worked out that having a large octobox was probably going to be too much for the room. It might have been too large and would have impeded on the space. The fact that we didn't have an infinite ceiling, so there was really a limited amount of space we could go up, and having such a large octobox would just take up too much space, we decided to go down a different path and find a different solution. One of those solutions, which we didn't end up using, was an idea that I had that maybe we could wrap muslin around a hula hoop and then put that hula hoop in front of a light. And that was an idea, but that didn't happen either. In the end, we ended up having to make do with what we had. So we did have a LED panel, a very strong LED panel, set on to tungsten, and that was through a couple of layers of muslin, which was ballooned outwards to kind of create a much softer dome, and then we skirted that with some black material. So having that on the end of the boom and straight overhead, kind of butterfly lighting Elizabeth, and then it doesn't really touch the band members on the side. They get lit by two lights that we had coming through a door and a window, or a door. I think there were doors on both sides. We had the lights spilling through there to capture the band members. It worked. It worked, it looked okay, but it definitely wasn't exactly what I was after. That light source on Elizabeth, that needed to be a lot bigger, but we made do with what we had, and I'm really proud that we managed to pull that together. But that's a part of a DP's job. Your job is to try and work out a solution to the problem, to get what the director is looking for, and to achieve that look that you're looking for. But sometimes you do have to make compromises, and those creative compromises They happen all the time. So I hope this was kind of enlightening into what my process is in shooting a low budget music video. This is by far not the only way to do it. There is definitely many ways to shoot a low budget music video. This is just how this one panned out. I hope you found it enjoyable to watch, and if you did enjoy it, please remember to give it a big fat thumbs up. And if you would like to see more of my face and learn a little bit more about filmmaking in the process, remember to subscribe, and I'll see you later.